In a world where royal privacy is guarded more fiercely than crown jewels, something extraordinary happened that made millions of people around the globe stop scrolling and lean closer to their screens. Picture this. It's an ordinary Tuesday morning when suddenly the internet explodes with excitement. Not because of another royal scandal or controversy, but because of something so unexpected, so genuine, and so beautifully human that it reminded everyone why the world fell in love with Catherine and William in the first place. For the first time in years, behind the carefully orchestrated public appearances and formal portraits, the Prince and Princess of Wales decided to pull back the curtain on their real lives. What they revealed wasn't just a collection of photographs. It was a window in a moment so private, so tender, and so authentically them that it changed how the world sees the future king and queen forever. These weren't the usual staged royal photos we're accustomed to seeing. These were the kind of pictures you might find in any family's photo album, except this family happens to wear crowns. The images that emerged told a story that no official royal biography could ever capture, revealing truths about love, parenthood, and finding joy in the simplest moments, even when the weight of a kingdom rests on your shoulders. What made millions around the world catch their breath wasn't just what these photos showed, but what they represented: a royal couple brave enough to show the world that beneath the titles and traditions they are at their core just like us. The decision to share these intimate glimpses of their lives didn't happen overnight. Catherine had been quietly collecting these moments for months. Each photograph carefully chosen not for its technical perfection, but for the story it told about their family's journey through 2025. The year had been particularly challenging for the royal family. Behind the public smiles and official engagements, William and Catherine had been navigating the complex balance of raising 3 children while preparing for their future roles as king and queen. The pressure had been mounting from all sides: the media's constant scrutiny, the public's endless expectations, and the weight of centuries-old traditions that sometimes felt at odds with modern parenting. It all began with a simple moment captured by Catherine during a family holiday in the Scottish Highlands. The photograph showed William teaching Prince George how to skip stones across a lake, both of them completely absorbed in the simple pleasure of the moment. George's tongue was sticking out in concentration, while William crouched beside his eldest son, his face reflecting pure joy and patience. In the background, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis were building a fortress out of smooth river rocks, their laughter echoing across the water. Catherine had taken the photo without thinking, using her personal phone rather than any official camera. When she looked at it later that evening, she realized she had captured something precious, a moment where her husband wasn't the future king, but simply a father sharing a timeless tradition with his son. The image held no trace of royal protocol or public expectation, just the universal bond between parent and child. That photo became the catalyst for something much larger. Over the following weeks, Catherine found herself documenting more of these unguarded moments. There was William reading bedtime stories to Louis, complete with silly voices that made their youngest giggle uncontrollably. Another showed Charlotte helping her mother arrange flowers from their private garden, both of them covered in soil and grinning widely. One particularly touching image captured all 3 children piled onto their father during a lazy Sunday morning, creating a tangle of limbs and sleepy smiles. The photographs revealed a side of royal life that the public rarely sees. In one image, William could be seen attempting to braid Charlotte's hair before a family outing, his large hands struggling with the delicate task, while Charlotte patiently instructed him from her position in front of the mirror. The result was charmingly imperfect, but Charlotte's beaming smile showed she couldn't have cared less about the crooked parts. Another photo showed the family during a power outage at their country home, gathered around a table lit by candles, playing board games. William and Catherine were laughing at something Louis had said, while George concentrated intensely on his next move in what appeared to be a heated game of Monopoly. The scene was so wonderfully ordinary that it could have been any family making the best of an unexpected situation. As Catherine continued to document these moments, she began to notice patterns in their family life that she had taken for granted. William's dedication to being present for bedtime routines, despite his demanding schedule. The way Charlotte instinctively looked out for Lewis during family outings. George's growing sense of responsibility and his thoughtful questions about his future role. These weren't just random family moments. They were glimpses into how they were raising the next generation of royals. The tipping point came during a particularly difficult week in November 2025. The media had been especially critical of some royal decisions, and the constant speculation about their parenting choices had reached a fever pitch. Catherine found herself looking through the collection of photos on her phone, remembering the joy and love captured in each frame. She realized that these images told the real story of their family, not the narrative being constructed by outsiders, but the truth of their daily lives. That evening, as she and William sat together after putting the children to bed, Catherine showed him the collection she had been building. William was quiet as he scrolled through image after image, his expression softening with each photo. When he reached the one of himself struggling with Charlotte's hair, he laughed out loud, the kind of genuine laugh that had been rare during those stressful weeks. They talked late into the night about the gap between their private reality and public perception. William admitted that sometimes he felt like the world saw him only as a future king, forgetting that his most important role was as a husband and father. Catherine shared her frustration with the constant speculation about their children's development and their parenting choices, when the truth was so much simpler and more beautiful than any of the stories being told. It was William who first suggested sharing some of the photos. The idea seemed radical at first. The royal family had always maintained strict boundaries between public and private life. But as they continued to discuss it, both realized that showing this authentic side of their lives might actually serve a greater purpose. These images could remind the world that at their core, they were a family committed to love, laughter, and raising their children with strong values. The decision wasn't made lightly. They spent weeks considering which photos to include, always keeping their children's privacy and well-being as the top priority. They wanted to share enough to give people a genuine glimpse into their lives, but not so much that it would compromise their family's sense of normalcy or their children's right to grow up away from constant scrutiny. Catherine found herself returning again and again to that first photo of William and George by the lake. Something about it captured the essence of what she wanted the world to understand about their family. Here was a father teaching his son not just how to skip stones, but how to find joy in simple moments. Here was a future king showing his heir that leadership could be gentle, patient, and full of laughter. The more they discussed it, the more convinced they became that sharing these moments was the right decision. Not as a publicity strategy or damage control, but as a gift to all the people who had supported them over the years and who had wondered what their family life was really like behind the palace walls. The planning phase for releasing these personal photographs required careful coordination between the couple and their communications team. This wasn't going to be a typical royal photo release with formal portraits and official statements. Instead, they wanted to create something that felt organic and authentic while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. Catherine took the lead on curating the final selection. She spent hours reviewing hundreds of photos, considering not just the visual appeal of each image, but the story it told and the message it conveyed. She wanted to show the world different aspects of their family dynamic. William's playful side, the children's personalities, and the ordinary moments that made up the fabric of their daily lives. One photo that made the final cut showed William attempting to teach Charlotte how to ride a bicycle without training wheels. His face was a mixture of concentration and concern as he held the back of her seat, running alongside her while she pedaled determinedly forward. Charlotte's expression showed fierce determination mixed with just a hint of fear, while George cheered encouragement from the sidelines. The image perfectly captured the universal parental experience of wanting to protect your child while also helping them find their independence. Another selected photo revealed a quieter side of their family life. It showed Louis curled up asleep on William's chest during a family movie night, both of them unconscious while Catherine and the older children continued watching the film. William's protective arm encircled his youngest son, and his face in sleep looked younger and more peaceful than it ever did during public appearances. The photo spoke to the exhaustion that all parents know, but also to the profound contentment that comes from these stolen moments of closeness. The communications team initially worried about the unprecedented nature of this release. Royal photography had always been carefully controlled, with official portraits taken by established photographers and distributed through proper channels. The idea of sharing personal phone photos taken by Catherine herself was revolutionary in royal terms. However, the couple remained firm in their vision. They wanted authenticity, not perfection. Catherine insisted on writing the accompanying message herself, rather than having it crafted by speechwriters. She spent days working on the text, wanting to strike the right tone, personal but not too intimate, grateful but not overly sentimental. She wrote draft after draft, each time trying to capture what these moments meant to their family and why they had chosen to share them with the world. The technical aspects of the release required careful consideration as well. They decided to share the photos through their official social media accounts rather than through traditional royal media channels. This approach would allow them to control the narrative and timing while reaching their audience directly. The photos would be released gradually over several days, each with its own caption written by Catherine, creating a kind of visual diary of their year. William had his own concerns about the release. As someone who had grown up in the public eye and witnessed the complicated relationship between his family and the media, he was acutely aware of how quickly positive coverage could turn negative. He worried about opening their family life to even more scrutiny and analysis. However, Catherine's enthusiasm and the genuine beauty of the moments they had captured eventually convinced him that the benefits outweighed the risks. The couple decided to give their children some input into which photos would be shared. George, now old enough to understand the implications, was initially hesitant about sharing any photos at all. He had already begun to understand the weight of his future role and was naturally protective of their family's privacy. However, when Catherine explained that these photos could help people understand that he and his siblings were regular children who just happened to have extraordinary circumstances, he became more supportive of the idea. Charlotte, with her natural confidence and curiosity about the world's reaction, was excited about sharing some of the photos. She particularly loved the ones that showed her helping in the garden and learning to braid her mother's hair in return for all the times her parents had struggled with hers. Louis, still too young to fully understand, simply enjoyed looking at the photos and giggling at the memories they brought back. The week before the release, Catherine found herself second-guessing some of their choices. Were they sharing too much? Would people understand that these were genuine moments rather than staged photo opportunities? Would the photos achieve what they hoped, helping people see them as a real family rather than just royal figures? William reassured her by reminding her why they had decided to do this in the first place. The world had been quick to judge their parenting choices, their children's behavior, and their family dynamics based on brief public appearances and formal events. These photos would give people a more complete picture of who they really were when the cameras weren't rolling and the crowds weren't watching. The final selection included 12 photographs spanning different seasons and activities throughout 2025. There was the stone-skipping lesson by the lake that had started it all. A photo of the whole family working together to build a snowman during a rare London snowfall, all of them bundled up in woolly hats and scarves, with Catherine's nose bright red from the cold. An image of William reading to all three children in their favorite reading nook, surrounded by piles of books and stuffed animals. One particularly charming photo showed Catherine and Charlotte having what appeared to be a very serious tea party with Louis, all of them sitting on a blanket in the garden with proper teacups and an elaborate spread of sandwiches and cakes. Louis was clearly taking the occasion very seriously, his little face scrunched up in concentration as he carefully held his teacup with both hands. Another favorite showed George helping William with some basic car maintenance, both of them peering under the hood of one of the family's more modest vehicles. George wore a serious expression that mirrored his father's, and grease smudged both their foreheads. It was a perfect example of William ensuring his children learned practical skills despite their privileged circumstances. The photos were scheduled to be released on a Friday evening, a time when social media engagement was typically high, but news cycles were beginning to slow down for the weekend. This timing would give people the opportunity to really look at and absorb the images rather than quickly scrolling past them during a busy news day. Catherine spent the night before the release looking through the photos one final time. Each image brought back vivid memories of the moments they captured, the laughter, the conversations, the simple joy of being together as a family. She felt confident that they were making the right decision, sharing something beautiful and genuine with the world at a time when authenticity felt increasingly rare. The morning of the release, both Catherine and William felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They were about to invite the world into their private lives in a way that no senior royals had ever done before. The response would reveal whether the public was ready for this kind of authentic glimpse into royal family life, or whether the traditional boundaries between public and private were there for important reasons. The moment the first photograph appeared on their official social media accounts, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, the image of William and George skipping stones had been shared thousands of times, with comments pouring in from around the world. The reaction was unlike anything the royal social media team had experienced before. People weren't just liking and sharing the photos, they were telling their own stories in the comments. Parents shared similar moments with their children. Grandparents reminisced about teaching their own grandchildren the same simple pleasures. And families from every corner of the globe found connection points with the royal family that had never existed before. One comment that particularly moved Catherine came from a single mother in Australia who wrote about how the photo of William patiently teaching Charlotte to ride her bicycle reminded her that great parenting isn't about having all the answers, but about being present for the small moments. Another came from father in Canada who said the image of Louis sleeping on William's chest brought tears to his eyes because it reminded him of his own son, who had recently grown too big for such cuddles. The media response was equally unprecedented. Royal correspondents, who were accustomed to analyzing every gesture and facial expression in official royal appearances, found themselves writing about universal parenting experiences and the timeless nature of family love. Major newspapers ran the photos on their front pages, but instead of the usual speculation about royal relationships or children's development, the coverage focused on the genuine warmth and normalcy the images revealed. International media picked up the story with enthusiasm that surprised even the royal communications team. News outlets in countries that rarely covered royal news featured the photos prominently, with commentators noting how the images bridged cultural divides by showing experiences that parents everywhere could recognize and relate to. Celebrity parents began sharing their own similar family moments, creating an unexpected social media movement of authentic family photography. The hashtag that naturally emerged around the photos became a rallying point for parents who wanted to celebrate the imperfect, genuine moments of family life rather than the carefully curated images that typically dominated social platforms. What struck both William and Catherine as they watched the response unfold was how the photos seemed to give people permission to be real about their own family experiences. Comment after comment talked about embracing the messy, imperfect, joyful reality of raising children rather than trying to live up to impossible standards of perfect parenting. The children's reactions to the global response were as varied as their personalities. George was initially overwhelmed by the attention, but gradually came to understand that people were responding positively to seeing him as a normal child rather than just a future king. Charlotte delighted in the fact that photos of her tea party and bicycle riding had inspired other children to share their own adventures. Louis, still too young to fully grasp the scope of the response, simply enjoyed the extra attention and hugs from his parents. Within a week, the photos had been viewed millions of times and shared across virtually every social media platform. More importantly, they had sparked conversations about parenting, family values, and the importance of creating space for authentic relationships, even in the midst of demanding careers and public responsibilities. Letters and cards began arriving at the palace from families around the world. Parents wrote to thank Catherine and William for showing that royal children had the same joys and challenges as any children. Teachers shared how they had used the photos in discussions with their students about family diversity and the universal nature of love and care. Grandparents wrote about how the images reminded them to treasure simple moments with their grandchildren. One letter that particularly touched Catherine came from a young mother who had been struggling with postpartum depression. She wrote that seeing the photo of Catherine with soil under her fingernails from gardening with Charlotte, looking tired but genuinely happy, had helped her realize that perfect motherhood didn't exist and that finding joy in small moments was more important than maintaining appearances. The long-term impact of the photo release extended far beyond the initial social media response. Family photographers began advertising authentic family sessions that focused on capturing genuine interactions rather than posed portraits. Parenting blogs and magazines shifted towards celebrating real moments over manufactured perfection. The photos had inadvertently started a movement toward authenticity in how families documented and shared their experiences. Several months after the release, research studies began examining the phenomenon of the royal family photos and their impact on social media culture and parenting expectations. Sociologists noted that the images had provided a counterpoint to the often overwhelming pressure parents felt to present perfect family lives online. The photos had shown that even the future King and Queen of England dealt with tangled hair, failed bicycle riding lessons, and children who fell asleep at inconvenient times. For William and Catherine personally, the experience of sharing these intimate moments had been transformative. They had worried about opening their family life to greater scrutiny, but instead found that showing their authentic selves had created a deeper connection with the public than any formal royal engagement had achieved. People responded to them not as distant royal figures, but as fellow parents navigating the beautiful challenges of raising children with love, patience, and humor. The success of the photo release also influenced how they approached their royal duties moving forward. They began incorporating more authentic moments into their public engagements, allowing people to see glimpses of their real personalities rather than maintaining the formal distance that had traditionally characterized royal interactions. This shift didn't diminish the respect people felt for their roles, but rather deepened it by showing the genuine care and thoughtfulness they brought to their responsibilities. Catherine continued taking photos of their family moments, though she was now more selective about what she chose to share publicly. The experience had taught her the power of authentic storytelling and the hunger people had for real connection in an increasingly digital and superficial world. She began working with charities focused on family support and child development, using her platform to advocate for the importance of presence, patience, and unconditional love in raising children. William found that the positive response to their family photos had given him confidence to be more open about his own experiences as a father and future king. He began speaking more candidly in interviews about the challenges of balancing royal duties with family life, and his words resonated with working parents everywhere who struggled with similar balancing acts. Looking back on the decision to share those personal photographs, both Catherine and William recognized it as a pivotal moment in their royal journey. They had taken a risk in showing the world their authentic family life, and the overwhelmingly positive response had taught them that people craved genuine connection more than royal mystique. The photos had reminded everyone, including themselves, that beneath the titles and traditions, the most important things in life remained beautifully, wonderfully simple: love, laughter, and the precious everyday moments that make up a family story. The 12 photographs that Catherine had carefully selected from her personal collection had accomplished something that years of formal royal portraits and official statements never could. They had shown the world that the future king and queen were, at their core, devoted parents who found their greatest joy in the same simple pleasures that brought happiness to families everywhere. In sharing those authentic moments, they had not only strengthened their connection with the public, but had also reminded themselves of what truly mattered most in their extraordinary yet wonderfully ordinary lives.